The term capital city doesn't really have a universally accepted definition. Sometimes the capital city is defined in the country's constitution, while in other cases we have to look for the location of its government. However, different branches of the government can be housed in different places, so a country can have more than one capital city, like the modern nation of South Africa. The government of the Roman Empire also had periods when it was divided geographically. So in this video we are going to explore which cities could claim to have been its capitals. The question of what is the capital of the Roman Empire wasn't really a question up until the reign of Diocletian. The primary status of Rome was obvious for anyone living in Respublica Romana. Ever since Augustus, the government of the empire was based on the joint rule of the emperor and the Senate of Rome. And while the real power of the Senate diminished, and the emperors were way more often picked by the army, the approval of the Senate was still necessary to make the emperor's rule official. The city of Rome thus remained the only permanent seat of political power in the empire. Emperors could spend years on campaigns, and some didn't even get a chance to visit Rome, but the Senate remained in the city. Even though the emperor legally represented half of the imperial government, and practically something like 90% of its power, no one was claiming that the residence of the emperor was the real capital. But 3 centuries of decline of senatorial authority could not have gone unnoticed. The first actual challenge to Rome's primary status came with the Emperor Diocletian and his junior colleague Maximian. Diocletian came to power in 284, after the empire had gone through a decades-long period of turmoil, known as the Crisis of the 3rd century. One of his first acts as emperor was appointing his friend Maximian as a junior colleague. And an interesting distinction of this appointment from all the previous ones was that Diocletian decided not to seek the approval of the Senate for it. This snubbing of the Senate was a break with centuries-long tradition. Before Diocletian, it was understood that the appointment of an emperor needs confirmation of the Senate to be constitutional. Diocletian's reform did away with the constitutional facade of senatorial importance and established the emperor as the main sovereign of the state. The Senate of Rome was still the imperial Senate and did have some sovereign powers. But the difference was that now the emperor was the clear supreme power, who did not need the Senate to approve his actions. Now, where does it leave us with the question of the capitals? Well, despite those political changes, Rome is still the capital. Even though its status can no longer be attributed to housing the repository of supreme power, even on paper, in the minds of the Romans it is still caput mundi, the head of the world. And the Senate of Rome still remains a branch of imperial government, even though its authority had been severely diminished. But now there are other seats of imperial power, like Diocletian's residence in Nicomedia, and Maximian's imperial palace in Mediolanum, modern-day Milan. This is probably the first time in the empire's history when Rome's status as the sole imperial capital can be challenged. Diocletian and Maximian went forth and appointed 2 more imperial colleagues for themselves, and formed the system of rule which we now call the Tetrarchy. Each of the tetrarchs had his own imperial capital. Nicomedia and Mediolanum were joined by Augusta Treverorum, modern-day Trier, which became the residence of the junior emperor of the West, and by Sirmium, which housed the Eastern Caesar. Antioch and Thessalonica also served as residences for Eastern emperors. Diocletian's system did not last long, and in the wake of his abdication, a civil war broke out. As in every civil war, the centers of power shifted rapidly, but one notable point is that during the first phase of the conflict, the Roman Senate had one of its last episodes of relevance. The Senate supported Maximian's son Maxentius, who promised them the return of old privileges. But his defeat at the hands of Constantine in the Battle of Milvian Bridge put an end to this ambition. Constantine, whom we know as Constantine the Great, was the ultimate winner of the 18 years long conflict. He started the process of Christianization of the empire, and in 330 inaugurated a new capital, Nova Roma or New Rome, at the location of the city of Byzantium. After celebrating the council, the emperor fortified the walls of Byzantium and embellished buildings, and made it equal to imperial Rome, and gave it his name of Constantinople, ordering that it be named Second Rome. The law was engraved on the imperial column in the Strategium, by the equestrian statue of the emperor. This gives us clear evidence that Rome was still held in high regard, and the new capital was intended to be its equal. Now the empire had two main capitals. Even though Constantinople had a long way to grow to reach the splendor of old Rome, its association with the emperor gave it prestige that equaled the old capital. Constantine even created a senate in his new capital, although it didn't yet have the same powers as the old senate. After Constantine died and the dust of the messy succession struggle has settled, the empire was divided into three parts between his sons. They all took the residences of earlier tetrarchs for their imperial capitals. Constantine II was in Trier, Constans in Sirmium and Thessalonica, and Constantius II resided in Constantinople in Antioch. When Constantine declared war on his youngest brother and got himself killed, two remaining siblings rearranged the empire between them, and Constans moved to Milan. A major event occurred in 357, which is often overlooked in the history of the split between the Eastern and the Western empires. Constantius II vested the Senate of Constantinople with imperial powers, which made it equal to the Senate of Old Rome. The Old Senate was still more prestigious because of its antiquity, but the Senate of New Rome had the same formal authority. This arrangement has been maintained for about half a century from that point. The Old Roman Senate did the bidding of the Western Emperor, who resided in Mediolanum, and the Senate of Constantinople followed the orders of the Eastern Emperor, whose seat was either in the same city or in Thessalonica. The 5th century was a period of rapid decline for the Western Empire. It's been plagued by revolts and invasions, and in 402, General Stilicho, who acted as a regent for young Emperor Honorius, moved the imperial residence from Mediolanum to a more defensible city of Ravenna. From this point and until the fall of the Western Empire in 476, Ravenna can be called the imperial capital, but Rome still housed the Senate and was the most important city in the West. A lot of 5th century emperors also preferred to rule from Rome, which proves the notion that the Eternal City remained at least one of the capitals of the Western Empire until its downfall. After 476, there was no emperor in the West, and even though the Roman Senate still held meetings, it now served as an advisory board for the Ostrogothic king of Italy. The sole capital of the Roman Empire was Constantinople. In the middle of the 6th century, after Justinian's reconquest of Italy, the Old Rome was back in the imperial fold. Corpus Juris Civilis has both Constantinople and Rome listed as Caput Mundi, the heads of the world. But this arrangement did not last. The prolonged Italian War, plague, and another wave of invasions provoked the exodus of the population from Old Rome. It no longer possessed the splendor it once had, and the pretense of its importance was fading away. The remaining Italian possessions of the empire were administered somewhat competitively by the Pope of Rome and the Eastern Roman governorship called the Exarchate of Ravenna. Over the next century and a half, the empire lost huge swaths of land and came close to total destruction on more than one occasion. But the city of Constantine withstood every siege of that era, and the Roman state survived. But with constant existential threat from the east, the empire could not spare much resources to maintain its Italian possessions. The Italians were left to their own devices, and the ties with the Old Rome were weakening. In the middle of the 8th century, Ravenna was conquered by the Lombards, and Old Rome completely slipped from imperial control. From this point and until 1204, Constantinople is once again the only capital of the empire. Between those points, the empire had a decline, a revival, and another decline, but all of the power of the empire remained concentrated in the Queen of Cities. The disastrous Fourth Crusade led to the sack of Constantinople and the establishment of the so-called Latin Empire, ruled by Frankish crusaders. The resistance to Latin occupation was divided into several states. The Despotate of Epirus had its capital in Arta, the imperial pretenders from Komnenos dynasty resided in Trebizond, and Theodore Lascaris governed his rump state from Nicaea. The Nicaean state started in a very precarious position, but in a few decades became the clear power center for the resistance to Latin rule, and under Palaiologos dynasty led the effort to retake Constantinople. This was the last period of uncertainty in what city would be called the capital of the Roman Empire. In 1261, Palaiologos dynasty succeeded in recapturing Constantinople, and the city remained the capital of the re-established empire until its downfall in 1453. So this concludes the list of the cities that had any real claim to being called a capital of the Roman Empire. To summarize, we can say that only Rome and Constantinople were ever the real capitals, but there were multiple cities that housed the imperial government, and because of this can also be considered capitals. This list includes Nicomedia, Mediolanum, Thessalonica, Antioch, Sirmium, Augusta Treverorum, and Ravenna. Another addition to this list should be Nicaea, which served as the capital of the government in exile for more than 50 years. This is pretty much it, but if you love historical technicalities and other trivia, I've got a couple more facts for you. In 616 AD, at the lowest point of the war against Persia, Emperor Heraclius thought about moving the capital to Carthage, but was convinced by Patriarch Sergius to remain in Constantinople. Another member of his dynasty, Constans II, has spent a later portion of his reign in the city of Syracuse, on the island of Sicily. He is rumored to have been planning to move the capital there, which may be one of the reasons for his assassination. There are a couple more cities that can be technically considered as a Roman capital. Their claim comes from being main cities of different Roman rump states. Two of these are from the fall of the Western Empire. One was in the northern Gaul and was headed by a Roman general Syagrius before it was conquered by the Franks in 486. Historians call it the domain of Soissons because its capital was Novia Donum, near modern-day French town of Soissons. The other was the domain of the penultimate Western Emperor Julius Nepos in Dalmatia. It lasted until 480 and had its capital in Salona. The fall of the Eastern Empire spawned another set of rump states. The Despotate of Morea with its capital in Mistras fell in 1460. Trebizond, which was de facto independent since before the Fourth Crusade, was taken by the Ottomans in 1461. And the last one to fall was the Principality of Theodoro in Crimea, which lasted until 1476. If we stretch our definition further, there are probably a couple more like this ones that I've missed, so if you know any of them, please let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one.